1940, nearly 400,000 Allied soldiers were trapped on the coast of France, with their backs to the sea and the German army closing in from every direction. The British Expeditionary Force was surrounded. Tanks were rolling toward the beaches. Bombers were circling overhead, and the entire world expected a catastrophe, the total destruction of Britain's army, and with it, any hope of continuing the war. Winston Churchill quietly warned his cabinet to prepare for the worst. The most optimistic estimates suggested that maybe 30,000 men could be pulled off those beaches before the Germans overran them. 30,000 out of nearly 400,000. Everyone else would be lost. But deep inside the white chalk cliffs of Dover, in a network of tunnels carved during the Napoleonic Wars, one man was already working on a plan that no one believed was possible. His name was Bertram Ramsay, and officially he was not even supposed to be there. Just 2 years earlier, the Royal Navy had forced him into retirement. He had been pushed out, sidelined, written off as a man whose career was finished. The Admiralty had no use for an admiral who refused to follow orders he considered wrong. And yet, when the greatest crisis in British military history arrived, it was this man they called back. Not a celebrated hero, not a political favorite, a retired officer sitting at home with no ship, no command, and no future. What happened next would become one of the most extraordinary events in the history of warfare. From a cramped underground room with a single window overlooking the English Channel, Ramsay orchestrated an evacuation that defied every prediction. They expected to save 30,000. He brought back 338,000. Soldiers, sailors, airmen from Britain, France, Belgium, and Poland. It was the miracle that saved an army and kept a nation in the war. But here is the part that almost nobody knows. Dunkirk was not the end of his story. It was only the beginning. 4 years later, this same man would plan and command the naval operation for D-Day, the largest seaborne invasion in the entire history of the world. Nearly 7,000 vessels, almost 200,000 sailors, the operation that broke open the gates of Nazi-occupied Europe. He did it once when everyone said it was impossible, and then he did it again on a scale the world had never seen. This is the story of Vice Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay, the most important Allied commander you have probably never heard of. Bertram Home Ramsay was born on the 20th of January 1883 inside the grounds of Hampton Court Palace, the former residence of King Henry VIII. His family belonged to the Ramsay baronets of Balmain, part of the Scottish landed gentry, with deep roots in military tradition. His father was a brigadier general in the British Army. Both of his brothers followed the same path, choosing careers as army officers. But Bertram, as the middle son, had other ideas. At the age of 15, he turned his back on the family tradition and chose the Royal Navy instead. It was the first sign of a personality that would define his entire life. A man who made his own decisions, regardless of what was expected of him. He entered the Royal Naval College on HMS Britannia in 1898, and within 5 years he found himself in his first real combat, the Somaliland expedition of 1903. He was barely 20 years old, armed with a sword, and full of the kind of reckless courage that young officers often mistake for leadership. During one engagement, Ramsay gave the order to charge, and then sprinted forward himself, blade in hand, expecting his men to follow. When he finally looked back, he was alone. Not a single man had moved. It was a moment of pure embarrassment, but it taught him something he would carry for the rest of his career. A leader does not run ahead and hope others follow. A leader makes sure his people are ready first, and then sends them forward with a clear plan. After Somaliland, Ramsay's career moved steadily upward. He was promoted to lieutenant in 1904 and soon found himself serving aboard HMS Dreadnought, the revolutionary battleship that made every other warship in the world obsolete overnight. But what set Ramsay apart from his fellow officers was his choice of specialization. Most ambitious young men in the Royal Navy gravitated toward gunnery, the glamorous branch, the path to fast promotion and prestige. Ramsay chose signals instead, communications, coordination. It was the less flashy option, but it revealed something fundamental about the way his mind worked. He was not interested in commanding a single ship or firing a single battery. He wanted to move entire fleets. He wanted to understand how dozens of vessels could operate together as one coordinated force, each captain knowing exactly where to be and what to do at every moment. It was the art of orchestration, not solo performance. And this particular skill, the ability to plan massive, complex operations and then trust others to execute them, would one day make him the most indispensable naval commander of the Second World War. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Ramsay was a 31-year-old officer, hungry for his own command. And very early in the war, he was offered a position that most men in his place would have accepted without hesitation, a prestigious appointment as flag lieutenant aboard HMS Defence, a powerful armoured cruiser serving with the Grand Fleet. It was a career-enhancing role, a safe bet, a step closer to the top. But Ramsay turned it down. He did not want to serve on someone else's ship, in someone else's shadow. He wanted to command his own vessel, even if it meant waiting longer and accepting something smaller. That single decision saved his life. On the 31st of May, 1916, HMS Defence sailed into the Battle of Jutland, the largest naval engagement of the entire war. During the battle, the cruiser came under concentrated fire from German battle cruisers. A shell struck her magazine and the ship exploded in a catastrophic blast that was visible for miles. 893 men were on board. Every single one of them perished. There were no survivors. If Ramsay had accepted that posting, he would have been among them. And the evacuations at Dunkirk and the invasion fleet on D-Day would never have had the one man capable of making them happen. Instead, Ramsay spent the war doing exactly what he had asked for, commanding his own ships. He took charge of the river monitor HMS M25 in the Dover Patrol, hunting submarines and shelling enemy positions along the Belgian coast. He was mentioned in dispatches for his performance and promoted to commander in 1916. Then came the destroyer leader HMS Broke, and with it one of the most daring operations of the war, the Second Ostend raid in May of 1918, an attempt to block the German submarine base by sinking old ships in the harbour entrance. For his role, the French government awarded him the Chevalier of the Legion of Honour. And when the armistice finally came in November 1918, it was Ramsay's ship that carried King George V across the English Channel to France, a mark of trust that spoke volumes about his reputation. The years between the wars brought steady promotion and personal milestones. Ramsay commanded cruisers, served as an instructor at the Royal Naval War College, and climbed through the ranks with the quiet efficiency that had become his trademark. In 1929, at the age of 46, he finally married Helen Margaret Menzies. They would have 2 sons, David and Charles. By 1935, Ramsay had reached the rank of Rear Admiral. He was 52 years old, respected across the fleet, and everything in his career pointed toward the very highest levels of naval command. The future looked flawless, until the day he was assigned to serve under an old friend named Admiral Sir Roger Backhouse, and everything fell apart. In August of 1935, Ramsay received what should have been the assignment of a lifetime. He was appointed Chief of Staff to Admiral Sir Roger Backhouse, the Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, aboard the flagship HMS Nelson. The 2 men had known each other for years. On paper, it was a perfect match. a brilliant administrator serving under one of the most powerful admirals in the Royal Navy. In reality, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The problem was not personal, it was philosophical. Backhouse was a relentless centralizer. He insisted on controlling every detail of fleet operations himself, from major strategic decisions down to the smallest administrative matters. He worked around the clock, refused to delegate authority, and expected his staff to function as extensions of his own will rather than as independent thinkers. Ramsay saw this as not just inefficient but dangerous. He believed that a modern fleet could only function if its commanders were trusted to make decisions on their own, if the man at the top created a clear plan and then allowed his officers to execute it without constant interference. In private, Ramsay compared Backhouse's leadership style to that of Mussolini, a dictator who trusted no one and controlled everything. The tension between them escalated rapidly. One early incident set the tone for everything that followed. Ramsay once sent a signal to the fleet declaring that the signalmen aboard HMS Queen were a disgrace to the service. It was blunt, tactless, and absolutely characteristic of his personality. The next morning, the Queen's captain, a man named Beatty, arrived alongside HMS Nelson in full ceremonial dress, wearing his frock coat and sword, to deliver a formal complaint in person. It was a small episode, but it captured something essential about Ramsay. He said exactly what he thought, regardless of the consequences. By December of 1935, barely 4 months into the assignment, Ramsay took the extraordinary step of requesting to be relieved of his duties. In the Royal Navy, this was virtually unheard of. It was career destruction by choice. The first Sea Lord, Admiral Chatfield, later wrote that Ramsay had failed very badly in the role, describing him as a brilliant officer who was nevertheless lacking in tact and possessed what Chatfield called a willful and rather temerarious streak. The Admiralty offered Ramsay an alternative posting, flag officer on the Yangtze River in China, but he rejected it. If the Navy would not give him a role worthy of his abilities, he would rather have no role at all. In October of 1938, Bertram Ramsay was officially placed on the retired list. His career in the Royal Navy was over. In January of 1939, he received a promotion to Vice Admiral, but it was a hollow gesture, a courtesy rank awarded to a man the service no longer needed. He was 56 years old, sitting at home, and to all appearances finished. But history has a taste for irony. The very man who had ended Ramsay's career, Roger Backhouse, had by now risen to become First Sea Lord, the professional head of the entire Royal Navy. And when war clouds gathered over Europe in the autumn of 1938, it was Backhouse himself who quietly reached out to the officer he had driven into retirement. Even more remarkable was the deeper irony. The principle of delegation and trust that had cost Ramsay everything would soon prove to be the only approach capable of coordinating an evacuation of 300,000 men and, 4 years later, an invasion fleet of 7,000 ships. The quality that the Royal Navy had punished him for was the exact quality that would save the Allied cause. During the Munich crisis of September 1938, when Europe teetered on the edge of war over Hitler's demands on Czechoslovakia, the Admiralty suddenly realized it had a problem. The strategic command post at Dover, which controlled the narrowest point of the English Channel, had been effectively abandoned for years. Someone needed to go down there and assess whether it could be reactivated in time for a conflict that now seemed inevitable. And the man they sent was the one they had just discarded, Bertram Ramsay. What he found was a disgrace. Dover Castle, one of the most important military positions in all of Britain, was in a state of complete neglect. The tunnels beneath the cliffs were infested with rats. The wireless communications room The nerve center of any naval command had been converted into a lavatory. There was no functioning headquarters, no operational staff, and no infrastructure capable of running a war. Ramsay worked out of a local hotel while crews scrambled to make the tunnels usable again. By August of 1939, with war now just days away, he was formally appointed Flag Officer Dover, and the place he would command from was unlike any military headquarters in the world. The tunnels beneath Dover Castle had been carved into the white chalk cliffs in 1797 during the wars against Napoleon. A Royal Engineers officer named William Twiss had designed 4 parallel tunnels bored roughly 100 feet into the cliff face, about 15 meters below the surface. At the height of the Napoleonic threat, these tunnels housed more than 2,000 soldiers, making them the only underground barracks ever built in Britain. After Napoleon's defeat, they were sealed up and forgotten for over a century. Now in 1939, the tunnels were brought back to life and transformed into something far more sophisticated than barracks. The casemate level became the main Admiralty headquarters, fitted with plotting rooms where officers tracked ship movements across the Channel, telecommunications equipment linking Dover to the entire Royal Navy, and diesel generators to keep everything running if the power lines above were destroyed by bombing. At the heart of this underground complex was a large room with a wooden table covered in charts, surrounded by telephones and telegraph equipment. This was the room where Ramsay would coordinate the most desperate naval operation of the war, and it was known simply as the Dynamo Room. Ramsay's personal office sat at the end of one tunnel, a small space nicknamed the Igloo by his staff. It was the only room in the entire complex that had a window, cut directly through the chalk face of the cliff. From its narrow balcony, Ramsay could look out across Dover Harbour and the grey waters of the English Channel. On a clear day, he could see the coast of France. It was from this exact spot that he would soon watch the most dramatic rescue in military history unfold in real time. And it was also here that Winston Churchill himself would later stand gazing out at the skies during the Battle of Britain. But in the autumn of 1939, all of that still lay ahead. For now, Ramsay had a command, a headquarters carved from rock, and the growing certainty that the war everyone feared was about to begin. On the 10th of May, 1940, Germany launched its invasion of Western Europe, and everything the Allies had planned for collapsed within days. The French and British high commands had expected a repeat of the First World War, with the main German thrust sweeping through Belgium in a wide arc toward Paris. They moved their best forces north into Belgium to meet it, but the real blow came from a direction no one had taken seriously. The Ardennes Forest, a dense mountainous region along the borders of Luxembourg and southern Belgium that French military planners had dismissed as impassable for armoured vehicles. They were catastrophically wrong. 3 German Panzer Corps smashed through the Ardennes and crossed the River Meuse at Sedan on the 15th of May. Once through, there was almost nothing standing between them and the English Channel. General Heinz Guderian, the architect of Germany's armoured warfare doctrine, drove his tanks westward at a speed that stunned even the German high command. On the 20th of May, his forces reached the coastal town of Abbeville. In just 10 days, the German army had driven a corridor clean across northern France, cutting the Allied forces in two. The situation was now desperate beyond anything the British had imagined. Nearly 400,000 soldiers, the entire British Expeditionary Force, the Belgian Army, and the French First Army, found themselves trapped in a shrinking pocket along the coast of northern France. Boulogne fell, Calais fell. The only port still in Allied hands was Dunkirk, a small harbour town surrounded by flat, open beaches that offered almost no natural cover from air attack. The trap was closing, and there seemed to be no way out. And then something extraordinary happened. Something that military historians have debated ever since. On the 24th of May, with his tanks just miles from Dunkirk, Hitler issued a direct order for the panzers to halt. The reasons behind the decision remain contested to this day. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, commanding Army Group A, was deeply concerned about his exposed flanks and the fact that between 30 and 50% of his tanks had been lost or damaged in the rapid advance. Hermann Göring, as at the head of the Luftwaffe, had personally assured Hitler that his bombers could finish off the trapped Allied forces without any help from the army. Whatever the precise combination of factors, the result was the same. The most powerful armored force in the world stopped moving for 3 critical days. Guderian, who could see victory within his grasp, was left speechless by the order. Those 3 days changed the course of the war. While the German panzers sat idle, the Allied forces tightened their defensive perimeter around Dunkirk, and in the chalk tunnels beneath Dover Castle, Bertram Ramsay was given the one thing he needed most: time. Rundstedt would later call the halt order one of the great turning points of the entire conflict. He was right, because by the time the panzers started moving again, Ramsay's plan was already in motion. Ramsay did not wait for permission to start planning the evacuation. On the 20th of May, 6 full days before the Admiralty gave the official order, he gathered his staff in the Dynamo room beneath Dover Castle and began working through the problem. How do you pull an army off an open coastline under constant air attack with limited port facilities across one of the busiest and most dangerous stretches of water in the world? His initial estimate was grim: 45,000 men rescued over 2 days, and even that assumed everything went perfectly. Churchill's own expectation was even lower. He privately feared that no more than 20 or 30,000 could be saved. At 6:57 on the evening of the 26th of May, a Sunday, the Admiralty sent the signal that made it official. Operation Dynamo was to begin immediately. Ramsay had mapped out 3 possible routes across the English Channel. Route Z was the shortest at 39 miles, but it ran dangerously close to the French coast, where German artillery could reach the ships. Route X stretched 55 miles through waters riddled with mines and shoals. Route Y was the longest, 87 miles, but it offered the safest passage, swinging wide to the east before turning south to Dunkirk. In the days ahead, all 3 routes would be used, depending on which dangers were most intense at any given hour. The first day brought only 7,669 men home. It was a fraction of what was needed, and the situation on the ground was deteriorating by the hour. On the 27th of May, the Luftwaffe launched 12 separate raids on Dunkirk, 300 bombers, supported by 550 fighter sorties, dropping 15,000 high-explosive bombs and 30,000 incendiaries. The town's inner harbour was wrecked. Fires raged across the waterfront. Nearly 1,000 French civilians lost their lives in a single day of bombing. When Captain William Tennant, the senior naval officer sent ashore to coordinate the evacuation from the Dunkirk end, arrived and saw the destruction, he immediately signaled Dover, requesting every available small craft to be sent to the beaches east of the town. The harbour, it seemed, was finished, but Tennant was about to make a decision that would change everything. On the 28th of May, with Belgium surrendering unconditionally and the northern flank of the Allied perimeter collapsing, Tennant looked at the East Mole, a narrow concrete breakwater stretching 1,400 yards out into the harbour. It was just 8 feet wide, never designed for ships, built only to protect the harbour from waves. No vessel had ever docked alongside it. Tennant directed the ferry Queen of the Channel to try. It worked. The ship pulled alongside, troops scrambled aboard, and within hours Tennant signaled Ramsay to redirect all available vessels to the Mole. That improvised decision became the backbone of the entire evacuation. Over the coming days, roughly 200,000 men would walk along that narrow strip of concrete to safety. The pace accelerated, but so did the losses. On the 29th of May, 47,000 men were evacuated, but the cost was staggering. 19 British and French warships were sunk in a single day, along with 3 larger requisitioned vessels. The Admiralty, alarmed at the rate of destruction, made a decision that nearly ended the operation. They withdrew their 8 best modern destroyers from the evacuation, fearing that Britain would need them for the long war ahead. This was the moment that tested Ramsay more than any other. On the 30th of May, Captain Tennant sent a desperate message from Dunkirk, warning that the beaches would become untenable by morning without large ships. A destroyer could load 600 men at the mole in 20 minutes. Without destroyers, the same number of troops would take 12 hours to ferry from the beaches using small boats. The mathematics were brutal. Without those warships, the evacuation rate would collapse, and tens of thousands of men would be left behind. Ramsay picked up the telephone and called the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, directly. What followed was a heated and furious exchange, Ramsay demanding the destroyers back, Pound resisting. But Ramsay would not yield. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Pound finally relented and ordered the destroyers to return. It was arguably the single most important phone call of the entire operation. The results were immediate. On the 31st of May, 68,014 men were evacuated, more than anyone had believed possible for the entire operation when it began. It was the peak day, the moment when Ramsay's planning, Tennant's improvisation, and the courage of thousands of sailors and soldiers came together in a feat of logistics that defied every expectation. But the sea demanded its price. The 1st of June brought clear skies and perfect conditions, not for the evacuation but for the Luftwaffe. It was the most devastating day for Allied shipping in the entire operation. 4 destroyers were sent to the bottom, along with 27 other vessels. Daylight evacuation was suspended entirely. From this point on, ships would cross only under the cover of darkness. By the night of the 2nd of June, the British rearguard had been pulled off. General Harold Alexander and Captain Tennant made a final tour of the harbour and beaches in a motor launch, calling out through a megaphone to make sure no British soldiers remained. At 10:50 on the morning of June the 3rd, Tennant sent his final signal to Ramsay across the channel, operation completed, returning to Dover. But the story was not quite over. Churchill insisted the Royal Navy go back for the French troops, still holding the perimeter. Over the nights of the 3rd and 4th of June, British ships returned and rescued more than 52,000 additional French soldiers. The very last vessel to leave, HMS Shikari, departed Dunkirk harbour at 3:40 in the morning on June the 4th, carrying 383 men, with German forces just 3 miles away. At 14:23 on the 4th of June 1940, Operation Dynamo was officially declared over. But before the final numbers could sink in, there is one part of the story that demands its own telling, because it has become the most famous image of Dunkirk, and also the most misunderstood. On the 27th of May, the Ministry of Shipping began telephoning boat builders and yacht clubs across the south of England, requesting every shallow draft vessel that could make the crossing to France. What followed was one of the most remarkable mobilizations in British history. Between 700 and 850 small civilian craft answered the call. Pleasure yachts, motor launches, fishing boats, Thames sailing barges, cockle boats, lifeboats, fire service boats, and even simple rowing boats. The smallest of them all was the Tamzine, a 15-foot open fishing boat, barely 4.5 meters long, that is now preserved in the Imperial War Museum in London. Among the most extraordinary participants was Commander Charles Lightoller, who sailed his private yacht, Sundowner, across the Channel and brought back 127 men crammed into a vessel designed for a handful of passengers. Lightoller was no stranger to maritime emergencies. He had been the senior surviving officer of the Titanic. These are the images that have come to define Dunkirk in popular memory. Tiny boats bobbing across the Channel, ordinary civilians sailing into a war zone to rescue their army. And it is a powerful and largely true story. But there is a number that complicates the myth, and it is a number that most people have never heard. Of the 338,226 men evacuated during Operation Dynamo, 71%, 239,465 soldiers, were rescued from the harbour and the East Mole. Only 29% came off the open beaches. The iconic footage of soldiers wading chest-deep through the surf to reach small boats is real, but it represents less than a third of the total evacuation. The vast majority was saved by destroyers and larger vessels pulling alongside Tennant's improvised pier, the concrete breakwater that was never designed for the purpose. Without Ramsay's decision to fight for those destroyers, and without Tennant's gamble on the Mole, the little ships alone could never have achieved what the world remembers. The final accounting of Operation Dynamo was staggering in both its triumph and its cost. 338,226 Allied soldiers were brought to safety. 198,229 British, and approximately 140,000 French, Polish, and Belgian. 243 of the roughly 860 vessels involved were sunk, including 6 British and 3 French destroyers. The Royal Air Force flew more than 3,500 sorties over Dunkirk, losing 145 aircraft. But the army that was saved left behind nearly everything it had carried to France. 2,472 artillery pieces, almost all of its 445 tanks, 63,879 vehicles, and more than 500,000 tons of supplies and ammunition. Britain's army had survived, but it had been stripped bare. On the very day Dynamo ended, Winston Churchill rose in the House of Commons and delivered the speech that would define the moment for generations. He called it a miracle of deliverance, achieved by valor, by perseverance, by perfect discipline, by faultless service. But he was careful to add a warning that is often forgotten. We must be very careful not to assign to this deliverance the attributes of a victory, he told Parliament. Wars are not won by evacuations. 3 days later, Bertram Ramsay was knighted, appointed Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath, and summoned to report personally to King George VI. The man the Navy had thrown away had just pulled off the most extraordinary rescue operation in the history of warfare. But as Churchill had warned, the war was far from over, and Ramsay's greatest challenge was still 4 years away. After Dunkirk, Dover became the most dangerous place in Britain. The Germans were now just 21 miles across the Channel, and they made sure everyone in the town knew it. Long-range artillery batteries on the French coast hurled shells into Dover at random intervals, while the Luftwaffe bombed the harbour, the town, and the cliffs above the tunnels with relentless regularity. The locals gave it a name that stuck: Hellfire Corner. Dover Castle itself was designated a fortress to be defended to the last man. The tunnels were provisioned for a 6-week siege, and explosives were placed throughout the structure so it could be destroyed rather than captured. It was during this period that Ramsay faced one of the most painful episodes of his command. On the 12th of February, 1942, 3 powerful German warships, the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, and the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen broke out of the port of Brest and raced up the English Channel toward Germany. Astonishingly, they went undetected for more than 12 hours. By the time the alarm was raised, Ramsay had almost nothing available to stop them. He authorized a desperate attack by 6 obsolete Swordfish torpedo bombers led by Lieutenant Commander Eugene Esmond of 825 Naval Air Squadron. The crews knew it was almost certainly a one-way mission. All 6 aircraft were shot down. Esmond was awarded a posthumous Victoria Cross, the highest honor for valor in the British Armed Forces. Ramsay described the attack as one of the finest exhibitions of self-sacrifice and devotion to duty that the war had ever witnessed. Ramsay left Dover in April of 1942 and moved to a larger stage, the Mediterranean. As Deputy Naval Commander under Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, he helped plan Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa in November 1942, commanding the landings along the Algerian coast. Then came Operation Husky in July of 1943, the invasion of Sicily, where Ramsay commanded the Eastern Naval Task Force responsible for delivering Montgomery's 8th Army to the beaches. It was Montgomery himself who later paid Ramsay a remarkable compliment, calling him the only sailor who truly grasped the fact that the invasion was only the beginning of any combined operation, that getting the troops ashore was just the first step in a much longer logistical challenge. By October of 1943, Ramsay's reputation had reached the point where there was only one man the Allies trusted with the naval dimension of the coming invasion of France. He was appointed Allied Naval Commander for Operation Neptune, the maritime component of the vast plan known as Overlord. He was restored to the active list, promoted to full admiral, and given command of the largest fleet ever assembled in human history. The retired officer who had been written off 5 years earlier was now responsible for putting the Allied armies back on the soil of France, the very same coastline he had rescued them from in 1940. The scale of what Ramsay now commanded was almost beyond comprehension. Operation Neptune involved 6,939 vessels, 7 battleships, 23 cruisers, more than 80 destroyers, 247 minesweepers, over 4,000 landing craft, and hundreds of support ships. Nearly 200,000 naval personnel crewed this armada, drawn from the Royal Navy, the United States Navy, the Merchant Navy, and a dozen other allied nations. On the first day alone, more than 132,000 troops would be landed on the beaches of Normandy. Within a month, that number would exceed 1 million. The historian Corelli Barnett called it a never-surpassed masterpiece of planning. And at the heart of that plan were the very principles of delegation that had destroyed Ramsay's career 9 years earlier. 5 assault forces, 1 for each beach, each commanded by an officer who knew exactly what was expected and was trusted to execute without interference. Every ship in the fleet would pass through a single rendezvous point southeast of the Isle of Wight, codenamed Piccadilly Circus, before funneling south through 10 swept channels known as the Spout. The minesweepers went first, and by 3:30 on the morning of June the 6th, all 10 channels were clear. Even the secrecy measures had an extraordinary quality. The massive operational map at Southwick House, the Victorian mansion near Portsmouth, that served as the invasion headquarters, was manufactured by Chad Valley, a toy company. To prevent the workers from understanding what they were building, the firm was asked to construct a map of all of Western Europe. Only the Normandy section was installed on the wall. The 2 delivery men who saw the final product were detained at Southwick House and held there until after the invasion was underway. But the most dramatic moments came in the final hours before launch. D-Day had been set for the 5th of June, but deteriorating weather forced Eisenhower to consider a delay. Ramsay sided with Air Chief Marshal Tedder against proceeding, while Montgomery pushed to go, regardless of the conditions. Eisenhower postponed by 24 hours. The delay nearly caused a catastrophe. Convoy U-2A, carrying troops from Salcombe to Utah Beach, had already sailed and failed to receive the recall signal. Panic swept through the operations room until a Walrus reconnaissance aircraft located the convoy 30 miles south of the Isle of Wight and dropped coded messages in canisters onto the ships below. On the evening of the 4th of June, the meteorologist Group Captain Stagg reported a narrow window of improved weather. Ramsay delivered an ultimatum that left no room for hesitation. If Overlord is to proceed on Tuesday, I must issue provisional warning to my forces within the next half hour. Eisenhower made his decision. Okay, we will go. At the final confirmation meeting at 3:30 on the morning of June the 5th, Ramsay stated that the fleet needed to launch immediately and left the room to set nearly 7,000 ships in motion. There was one final act of defiance before the invasion began. Both Winston Churchill and King George VI had announced their intention to observe the landings from aboard HMS Belfast. Ramsay flatly refused to accept responsibility for either of them, pointing out that the ship would be under fire 14,000 yards from shore, that both men would be unreachable for urgent decisions if the landings went wrong, and that the ship's commander would be compromised by the need to protect VIP passengers. Both the Prime Minister and the King remained ashore. Very few subordinate commanders in history have successfully overruled their nation's head of government and head of state at the same time. On January 2nd, 1945, Admiral Ramsay left his headquarters near Paris for an airfield south of Versailles, flying to Brussels for a conference with Montgomery. His regular pilot, Lieutenant Commander Brett, was on leave visiting a relative in Cannes. The replacement was Lieutenant Commander Sir George Lewis, who, according to historian Justin Smith, had personal reasons for wanting to be in Paris, linked to a romance with Kay Summersby, Eisenhower's personal driver. It had snowed heavily overnight, and the Lockheed Hudson had sat exposed on the airfield through bitter cold. At 11:15, the aircraft failed to gain altitude, flying nose up at an unnatural angle before falling tail first from roughly 800 feet. All 5 aboard lost their lives. Ramsay was 61, 18 days short of his birthday. 4 months from the victory, he had done more than almost anyone to make possible. The Imperial War Museum holds rare silent footage from that morning. Ramsay boarding the Hudson, followed by a cut to burning wreckage surrounded by fire crews. Eisenhower personally led the funeral procession at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, while a simultaneous memorial service was held at Westminster Abbey. So why does no one know his name? He was gone before the war ended. No memoirs, no victory speeches, no peacetime fame. His deputy, Captain Hale, wrote that Eisenhower and Montgomery maintained considerable organizations to ensure maximum publicity, while Ramsay shunned it at every opportunity. The little ship's myth turned Dunkirk into a story about plucky civilians rather than the naval mastermind who made the rescue possible. D-Day has always been told as soldiers storming beaches, not the admiral who put them there. Even his personality worked against remembrance. A slight figure with a quiet voice who bore his tremendous burden stoically, confiding only in his wife. There is one final detail that captures who he was. In September 1944, when Montgomery raced north toward Arnhem with Operation Market Garden, Ramsay was the only senior Allied commander who warned that the port of Antwerp was as useless as Timbuktu, while Germany still held the Scheldt estuary. He was ignored. He was right. Montgomery later admitted the delay had been a bad mistake. Today, a bronze statue stands at Dover Castle, near the tunnels where he planned Dynamo. A memorial in the French village where his aircraft went down still flies the Union Jack. His grandson William once said, "It was fitting that he was chosen to send the Allies back to France in 1944 after bringing them home in 1940. He saved an army when the world expected it to be lost. He launched the greatest invasion in history, and then he was gone before anyone had a chance to thank him."